My name is Barbara A. Patterson, 29 years old. Looking back now, I realize the moment my relationship truly ended wasn't when my boyfriend walked out the door. It was the night he looked into my eyes with complete confidence and explained why leaving me for someone better would simply be the logical thing to do. That sentence changed everything, even if neither of us understood it yet. Daniel Carter and I met 8 years earlier during college. I was studying engineering while he majored in marketing. We spent countless evenings in the library pretending to study while secretly competing over who could stay awake the longest before finals. Daniel had an effortless charm that drew people toward him. He made me laugh when I was overwhelmed and somehow convinced me that together we could survive anything adulthood threw our way. After graduation, we rented a tiny apartment downtown and began building our future from almost nothing. I found a stable position at a technology company with dependable pay and benefits. Daniel bounced between marketing jobs, always convinced his breakthrough was just around the corner. Whenever one opportunity collapsed, I reminded him another would appear. 2 years into our relationship, Daniel lost his job. For months, I covered every bill without complaint: rent, utilities, groceries, insurance. Whenever he apologized, I smiled and reminded him we were supposed to be partners. "We're a team," I always told him. And I truly believed it. When my company later offered me a promotion that required relocating, I declined without hesitation because Daniel wasn't ready to leave the city while rebuilding his career. I convinced myself sacrifices were simply part of loving someone. Looking back, I can finally see the warning signs I ignored. Daniel became obsessed with social media. Every evening, he scrolled through glamorous couples showing luxury vacations, expensive restaurants, designer clothes, and flashy success stories. At first, I thought he was simply looking for motivation. Eventually, those posts became comparisons. He would hand me his phone. "Look at this couple," he'd say. "See what happens when people take risks?" I laughed it off, although each comparison left a tiny crack inside me. Soon the comments became more personal. My coworker's girlfriend just surprised him with tickets to Greece. My friend's wife helped him launch his business. Some people really know how to push each other forward. He never directly criticized me. He didn't have to. One quiet evening while we were watching television together, Daniel suddenly paused the show. "Barbara," he said gently, "can we talk?" I expected another conversation about finances or work. Instead, he looked strangely calm. "I've been thinking about us." My stomach tightened. "I love you," he continued. "You're dependable, kind, but sometimes I wonder whether we're limiting each other." I forced a smile. "What do you mean?" He leaned back casually. "I keep seeing people building bigger lives together. More excitement, more ambition." I stayed silent. Then came the sentence I will never forget. "If another woman came along who inspired me more, who could help me become a better version of myself, why wouldn't I see where that could go?" Everything inside me froze. So, our relationship depends on whether someone better appears? Daniel shrugged. "It's not cheating if I'm honest." I stared at him. He continued speaking as though discussing career opportunities instead of our future. "People upgrade jobs, they upgrade houses. Sometimes people outgrow relationships." Then he smiled. "I'd never lie to you, Barbara." A pause. "But if someone better shows up, why would I stay?" For the rest of that night, I barely slept. Daniel's words echoed through every quiet corner of our apartment. People upgrade jobs, houses, partners. I kept replaying every sacrifice I'd made over the last 8 years. The promotion I'd turned down because he wasn't ready to relocate. The weekends I'd spent encouraging him after failed interviews. The nights I'd stayed awake helping him polish presentations while my own deadlines waited until morning. Had I really been nothing more than a temporary stop on his journey? I never confronted him. There was nothing left to argue. Instead, something inside me quietly shifted. The following Monday, I renewed my neglected gym membership. I accepted extra responsibilities at work that I'd previously declined. I started having lunch with coworkers instead of rushing home every evening. I even reconnected with old college friends Daniel had always claimed were holding me back. None of it was revenge. It was survival. Daniel noticed the changes almost immediately. "You've been busy lately," he commented one evening while scrolling through his phone. "I have been. Everything okay?" I smiled politely. "Better than okay." He nodded distractedly before returning to Instagram. That should have told me everything. Over the next several weeks, Daniel became increasingly fascinated with networking events hosted by people in his marketing circle. He came home later and later, always carrying the smell of expensive wine and expensive ambition. One name kept appearing: Olivia Brooks. "She's incredible," Daniel said during dinner one night. "Started her own consulting agency before 30. I kept eating. "She's brilliant." "I'm sure she is. And fearless." I simply nodded. The comparisons had stopped being subtle. Now they were constant. Daniel reposted motivational quotes every day. "Never settle for a life that's merely comfortable. Growth requires difficult choices. Average relationships create average futures." Mutual friends quietly began messaging me. "Is everything okay between you two?" Those posts seem oddly specific. I always answered the same way: "We're fine." But we weren't. One Friday evening, I came home to find Daniel already dressed for dinner. Dark blazer, new watch, the expensive cologne he only wore for important occasions. "We need to talk," he said. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. We sat across from one another at the kitchen table, where we'd once planned vacations and argued over pizza toppings. Now it felt like a business meeting. "I've done a lot of thinking." "I know." He folded his hands together. "Olivia asked me to dinner." I waited. "I've decided I want to see where this goes." I looked directly into his eyes. "So you're ending our relationship?" He shook his head. "Not exactly." I almost laughed. "What does that mean?" "I'm exploring possibilities." "You mean dating another woman?" "I'm being honest about it." He actually sounded proud. "If things don't work out, maybe we can revisit us." There it was. I wasn't his partner anymore. I was his backup plan. He looked around our modest apartment. "You deserve someone who's satisfied with this life." "This life?" I asked quietly. "Stability. Loyalty?" He sighed dramatically. "Barbara, don't make this emotional." I stared at him in disbelief. 8 years together, and somehow I was the emotional one. "People evolve," he continued. "Sometimes they outgrow relationships. Olivia understands where I'm trying to go." His phone vibrated. A smile instantly crossed his face. I already knew who the message was from. "I packed a bag for the weekend," he said while standing. "I'll stay with a friend after dinner." He picked up his overnight bag. For a second, I wondered whether he expected me to cry, beg, fight for him. Instead, I stood up calmly. "Makes sense." Daniel blinked. "That's all?" "What would arguing change?" He smiled with obvious relief. "I knew you'd understand." As he reached the front door, I spoke again. "I hope you find exactly what you're looking for." "I will." Then he walked away. The apartment became painfully silent. I allowed myself one night to grieve. I opened old photo albums, read birthday cards, remembered road trips, late-night conversations, promises about forever. I cried harder than I ever had. Not because I'd lost Daniel, because I'd finally realized I never truly had him. By sunrise, something unexpected happened. Peace, not happiness, just clarity. If Daniel truly believed people should leave whenever someone better appeared, then his rule belonged to me as much as it belonged to him. I cleaned the apartment from top to bottom, packed away every reminder that no longer belonged in my future, changed my daily routine, accepted a major project at work that my manager had been offering for months. When old friends invited me out for dinner, I finally said yes. Life slowly began expanding again. One Wednesday afternoon, while grabbing coffee before work, I accidentally bumped into someone carrying far too many architectural blueprints. Sheets of paper scattered across the sidewalk. "Oh no!" I laughed as we both knelt to gather them. "My fault," the man smiled. He looked about my age, wearing glasses and an apologetic expression. "I'm Ethan Hayes." "Barbara Patterson." "I guess we've officially met in the most embarrassing way possible," I laughed. For the first time in weeks. It felt genuine. We talked for nearly 20 minutes outside the cafe. Architecture, travel, books. Neither of us checked our phones once. Before leaving, Ethan hesitated. "I know this is sudden," he smiled awkwardly, "but would you like to get coffee sometime when neither of us is chasing blueprints across the sidewalk?" I surprised myself. I'd like that. As I walked toward my office, my phone vibrated. A message from Daniel. "Hope you're doing okay. Miss our routines yet?" I looked at the screen for several seconds. Then I typed only 4 words. "I'm doing just fine." I pressed send. For the first time since everything fell apart, I actually meant it. The next 2 weeks settled into a rhythm that felt unfamiliar but strangely peaceful. Every morning I woke up without wondering whether I was enough for someone else. Every evening, I returned to an apartment that was quiet instead of emotionally exhausting. For the first time in years, my future belonged entirely to me. Ethan and I kept seeing each other, never rushing anything. There were no games, no comparisons, no speeches about ambition or upgrading. We simply enjoyed each other's company, and somehow that felt more exciting than anything Daniel had promised during our final months together. Our third date was a Saturday afternoon at a botanical garden on the edge of the city. Ethan laughed easily, listened without interrupting, and remembered little details I'd mentioned days earlier. When I casually admitted that I loved sketching, but had stopped years ago because life became too busy, he smiled and pointed toward a small art shop across the street. "Then today's not over yet," he said. 20 minutes later, we were picking out sketchbooks together. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't dramatic, but somehow that small gesture carried more thoughtfulness than many of the grand promises Daniel had made over 8 years. Meanwhile, Daniel seemed determined to convince the world that leaving me had transformed his life. Every few days, another carefully edited photo appeared online. Elegant restaurants, rooftop bars, luxury hotel lobbies. Olivia Brooks was always beside him, smiling confidently as though they had become the city's newest power couple. Mutual friends quietly sent me screenshots, probably expecting those pictures to hurt. Surprisingly, they didn't. Looking at them felt like watching strangers perform in a commercial. The life they displayed looked polished, but it no longer belonged to me. One evening, while Ethan and I were cooking dinner together, my phone buzzed with a message from one of our mutual friends. "Have you heard what's happening with Daniel?" I hadn't. Apparently, the perfect relationship wasn't nearly as perfect behind closed doors. Olivia had convinced Daniel to invest money into what she described as an exciting consulting expansion. She assured him it would connect him with influential clients and accelerate his own career. Daniel eagerly agreed, dipping into savings he'd spent years building. A month later, those promised opportunities hadn't appeared. Instead, Olivia kept asking for more financial help while insisting success was just around the corner. The stories continued arriving piece by piece. At networking events, Olivia openly flirted with wealthy executives, dismissing Daniel whenever he questioned her behavior. "It's called building connections," she'd tell him. Sound familiar? One mutual friend admitted she had watched Olivia spend nearly an entire evening laughing with another man while Daniel wandered around the venue alone, pretending everything was fine. When he confronted her afterward, she reportedly rolled her eyes and accused him of being insecure. I couldn't ignore the irony. The same dismissive language Daniel had once used against me was now being thrown back at him. A week later, another update arrived. During a charity gala, Olivia embarrassed Daniel in front of several colleagues by joking that he was still learning how successful people think. Everyone laughed awkwardly while Daniel forced a smile. Someone who attended later confessed they genuinely felt sorry for him. I remembered sitting on our couch months earlier while Daniel compared me to more accomplished women. Now someone was comparing him to more accomplished men. Karma rarely announces itself. It simply arrives wearing someone else's face. While Daniel's relationship became increasingly unstable, mine continued growing stronger in the quietest possible way. Ethan never tried to impress me with expensive dinners or exaggerated dreams. Instead, he celebrated ordinary moments. We explored bookstores on rainy afternoons, cooked new recipes that usually failed spectacularly, and spent entire evenings talking about childhood memories. I never felt like I had to compete for his attention or prove my worth. One Friday after work, he looked at me across the dinner table and asked, "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I've noticed you apologize a lot." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You apologize before asking questions. You apologize for taking up space. Even when you laugh too loudly, you say sorry afterward." I hadn't realized I did that. "You don't have to earn the right to exist around me, Barbara." Those simple words hit me harder than I expected. Somewhere during my years with Daniel, I'd unconsciously learned that love could disappear if I wasn't constantly enough. Ethan never made me feel that way. Not once. Meanwhile, Daniel's situation worsened dramatically. Mutual friends eventually learned that Olivia wasn't nearly as successful as she'd claimed. Much of her glamorous lifestyle came from expensive credit cards and borrowed money. Several of the business opportunities she'd bragged about had never existed. Even worse, she had quietly been seeing another investor behind Daniel's back while continuing to accept his financial support. When Daniel finally confronted her, she reportedly laughed. "Don't be so dramatic," the exact phrase he'd once used while ending our relationship. She continued without hesitation, "People evolve." Then she added the sentence that left everyone speechless. "If someone offers me a better future, why wouldn't I take it?" Daniel stood there, hearing his own philosophy spoken back to him. Except this time, he was the disposable one. Daniel didn't contact me immediately after Olivia left him. At first, I assumed pride was keeping him silent. Later, I realized he had simply been trying to convince himself he could recover alone. That illusion lasted less than 2 weeks. One Tuesday evening, just as Ethan and I were finishing dinner at my apartment, my phone vibrated with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it until another message appeared seconds later. "Barbara, it's Daniel. Please don't block this number. I just need 5 minutes." I stared at the screen without saying anything. Ethan noticed the expression on my face, but didn't ask questions. Instead, he quietly collected the empty plates and carried them into the kitchen, giving me the privacy to decide what I wanted to do. That simple act reminded me again why being around him felt so different. He never demanded explanations. He trusted me enough to let me choose. I never replied. The next morning, another message arrived. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Olivia lied about everything. She used me. I understand now what I did to you. Please let me explain. Again, I said nothing. By the weekend, the messages had turned into phone calls. 3 in one evening, 4 the following afternoon. Every voicemail sounded more desperate than the last. Daniel's confident voice had disappeared completely. "Barbara, please answer. I know I don't deserve it, but I need to talk to you. I've been thinking about us every day. I was wrong. I see that now." Each recording ended with a long silence before the call disconnected. I archived every voicemail without responding. 3 days later, someone else reached out. Daniel's older sister, Megan. She hadn't spoken to me in months, so seeing her name appear on my phone immediately told me why she was calling. "Barbara," she began warmly. "How have you been?" "I'm doing well." "I'm glad to hear that." She paused before getting to the real reason. "Daniel has been going through a difficult time." I remained quiet. "He knows he made terrible decisions." "I'm sure he does." "He still loves you." The sentence hung between us. Megan continued carefully. "People make mistakes. Sometimes they don't realize what they have until they lose it." I finally spoke. "Megan, Daniel didn't lose me." She hesitated. "He threw me away." Silence filled the call. I spent 8 years believing we were building a future together. He looked me in the eyes and told me he'd leave if someone better came along. Then he did exactly that. Those weren't mistakes. Those were choices. She sighed softly. "I understand why you're hurt." "No," I answered calmly. "You understand why he's hurting." Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she whispered, "I was hoping you'd at least meet him. I hope he finds peace. But it won't be with me." I ended the conversation politely. That evening, Daniel sent another text. "Please, 1 coffee, 10 minutes." I deleted it. A week later, he appeared outside my apartment. I had just returned from grocery shopping when I saw him standing near the entrance holding a small bouquet of white lilies. He looked thinner than I remembered. His expensive suits had been replaced by wrinkled, casual clothes, and the confidence that once defined him had vanished completely. When he noticed me, he immediately walked forward. "Barbara." I stopped several feet away. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you." "You shouldn't have come." He looked down before extending the flowers toward me. "I'm sorry. I didn't reach for them. They're for you." "I don't want them." His shoulders slumped. "I've replayed everything 1,000 times. Every conversation, every stupid thing I said." I remained silent. "You were always there for me." Another pause. "I didn't appreciate you." His voice cracked. "I thought ambition meant constantly chasing something bigger." "And now?" "I know better." I looked directly at him. "No." He frowned. "You know consequences." The words seemed to hit him harder than if I'd shouted. He lowered the flowers. "I loved you." I shook my head gently. "You loved what I provided." His eyes filled with regret. "Barbara, please. Olivia wasn't who I thought she was." "I know. She manipulated me." "I know. She left me with debts, embarrassed me at work, and disappeared." "I know." He stared at me in disbelief. "You knew all that?" "People talk." He swallowed. "I deserve that." Another long silence settled between us. Finally, he whispered, "Can we start over?" Before I could answer, the building door opened behind me. Ethan stepped outside carrying the reusable grocery bags I'd accidentally left in the lobby. "There you are," he smiled before noticing Daniel. His expression remained calm, not threatened, not angry, simply curious. Daniel looked from Ethan to me, and I watched realization slowly spread across his face. This wasn't a temporary rebound. This was my life now. Daniel looked at Ethan for several long seconds before forcing a weak smile. "You must be Ethan." Ethan nodded politely. "I am." He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't act possessive. He simply stood beside me with the same quiet confidence that had become one of the things I admired most about him. Daniel looked back at me. "So, this is serious?" "Yes." His shoulders dropped a little farther. "I guess I kept telling myself you'd eventually answer my calls." "I already answered them." "You never replied." My silence was the answer. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Cars passed on the street behind us while people entered and exited the apartment building, without paying much attention to the conversation unfolding near the entrance. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "I deserve that." "You do." "I've spent every day thinking about what I said." "I believe you." I wasn't thinking clearly. I met his eyes. "No," he frowned. "You were thinking exactly the way you wanted to think." His expression tightened. I convinced myself success meant always chasing something bigger. And now? I understand that I already had everything. I let out a slow breath. "I was never something you had." He looked confused. "You had my loyalty, my trust, my time, my sacrifices. But you never truly had me." He lowered his head. "I know." "No," I shook my head gently. "You know because someone else treated you the same way." That sentence left him speechless. For the first time since he'd appeared outside my building, he had no response. Finally, he whispered, "You're right." Another silence settled between us. Then Daniel looked toward Ethan again. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan answered calmly. "If it's appropriate." He nodded. "Do you know everything?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I know enough." "And you're okay dating someone who still has all this history?" Ethan glanced at me before replying. "Everyone has a past. What matters is whether they learned from it." Daniel slowly nodded. "I guess I didn't." "No," Ethan replied gently. "You didn't." The conversation ended there. Daniel looked back at me one last time. "I really am sorry, Barbara." "I know." "I wish I could change everything." "So do I." His eyes lifted hopefully. "Really?" "Yes." "I wish you had been honest about who you were before I spent 8 years loving you." The hope disappeared from his face. He understood. There wasn't another chance hiding somewhere beneath my words. There never had been. He quietly placed the bouquet on a nearby bench. "I won't bother you again." "I appreciate that." Without another sentence, he turned around and walked away. I watched him disappear around the corner. Not with satisfaction, not with anger, just closure. A month later, Jake invited everyone to his birthday celebration at a rooftop lounge downtown. Ethan asked if I wanted to go, reminding me that mutual friends would probably be there. "If you'd rather skip it, we can." I smiled. "No. I'm done hiding." The rooftop overlooked the city skyline, glowing beneath hundreds of string lights. Music drifted through the warm evening air, while groups of friends laughed around high tables. Ethan and I spent most of the night talking with people I hadn't seen in months. Several quietly congratulated me on my promotion at work, while others admitted they had misjudged what had happened between Daniel and me. One friend leaned closer. "I owe you an apology." "For what?" I believed Daniel's version at first. I smiled politely. "That's in the past." About an hour into the party, I noticed Daniel standing near the bar. He looked healthier than he had outside my apartment, but the confidence still hadn't returned. He saw Ethan and me laughing together before slowly making his way across the room. Several mutual friends noticed immediately. The conversations around us became noticeably quieter. "Barbara," he said. I turned toward him. "Hi, Daniel. Could we talk?" "We're talking." He looked around uneasily. "I just wanted to say one last thing." I waited. I was wrong. No one interrupted. I thought ambition meant replacing people whenever something looked better. His voice trembled slightly. "I know now that loyalty is worth more than excitement." I nodded once. "I'm glad you learned that." "I wish I'd learned it sooner." "So do I." He looked directly at Ethan. "You're lucky." Ethan answered honestly. "I know." Daniel turned back to me. "I don't expect forgiveness. You already have it." His eyes widened. "You do?" "I forgave you a long time ago." Hope briefly returned. "But forgiveness doesn't mean going backward." His expression fell again. "I understand." I smiled gently. "I hope you really do." He hesitated before asking the question everyone nearby already knew the answer to. "Was she better?" I looked at Ethan. He smiled back without saying a word. Then I turned to Daniel. I repeated the sentence he had spoken months earlier. "Someone better came into my life." I paused. Why would I stay? The silence that followed seemed to freeze the entire rooftop. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief second. He recognized every word because they had once belonged to him. When he opened them again, he gave a small, defeated nod. "I guess I deserved that." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Ethan gently took my hand. "Ready?" I smiled, more than ever. Together we walked back toward our friends, leaving the past exactly where it belonged. Months later, Ethan and I moved into a new apartment overlooking the river. My career continued growing, my sketchbook slowly filled again, and life became wonderfully ordinary. Occasionally, I still heard updates about Daniel through mutual friends. He had changed jobs, kept mostly to himself, and was finally beginning to rebuild his life without blaming anyone else. I sincerely hoped he found happiness, just not with me. Sometimes people believe love is something they can replace whenever a shinier opportunity appears. They don't realize the rarest thing they'll ever find isn't excitement or status. It's someone willing to stand beside them when life isn't glamorous. Daniel traded that away because he thought someone better would always come along. Ironically, someone better did. For me.